My name is Angela Hahn. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an engagement advisor at the UBC Center for Community Engaged Learning, also known as CECL. I will be hosting this Social Impact Lab session along with my colleague and virtual co-host, Natsuki Abe. For those joining us online, should you have any questions, please don't hesitate to post in the chat, and Natsuki will do her best to assist. As we wanted to make this Social Impact Lab as broadly accessible as possible, we've taken up the challenge of offering both an online and in-person format for this event. It's CECL's first hybrid event, and we acknowledge that we're still learning how to operate in this space. So if we experience any technical or other difficulties with this hybrid event, please know that we're going to do our very best to manage these, and we ask that you be patient with us and with each other. As we get started, I would like to acknowledge Professor Michelle Stack, who's joining us here today. She's from the UBC Department of Educational Studies and Climate Justice UBC for their collaboration in the development of this Social Impact Lab. They'll both be speaking shortly. And now I would like to introduce Yusuf Alam, Associate Director at CECL, to welcome you all.
Thanks, Angela. Just move that up a bit there. Is that okay? Welcome, everybody. And you know what, it's really, for my heart anyways, if many of you have probably already been in a room full of people by this point, this term, but for me, it's the first time in terms of our programming where we can say that we're back together again, like in person. And those of you online, you're with us too. But really, it makes me so happy to see people in 3D once again. So thanks again, Angela, for introducing the center a little bit and some of the team that's working on this tonight. As we kind of dive into it, I just want to take some time for all of us to think and to acknowledge the land that we're on. UBC, of course, is located on the traditional ancestral and unceded territories of the Musqueam people. And for those of you tuning in from other locations, I ask that you similarly consider the land and the history of the land that you're on right now. But as a team, as Angela mentioned, there's a team of us here. And through our programs, we seek to support the varied strategies that Indigenous people take and are using to protect their land and their communities. It takes genuine and ongoing work to forge real understanding and to challenge the legacies of colonialism. I encourage all of us to reflect on this as we enter into this evening's programming, because this is where we're going to listen to voices and experiences that might be unfamiliar. We're also going to be asked to remain curious and open. We're also going to look for ways that we can stand together shoulder to shoulder. So keep that in the back of your mind as you kind of ponder where we are as we're doing this together. So as Angela said, there is a team behind this. There's a building behind CECL as well, but the team, beyond the three names that Angela put up there's a whole host of folks that work at the Center for Community Engaged Learning, and they're all in the background. And I just want to say a big thanks to everybody for the effort that they put into bringing this together, including you in the room, because you didn't just land here by mistake. I assume there's been a lot of thought put into what you could be doing with your time and your life and all the skills and the kind of learning that you're doing with folks like Michelle. So thank you for that. The work of this center and these types of events and these type of opportunities go back to 2006 at UBC. And since the time it opened, the center has really been working to realize this vision of citizens with skills to diagnose complex and multifaceted challenges in society, challenges that resolve that take multiple perspectives and challenges whose resolution contributes to an equitable, just, and thriving society. So day by day, we seek to ignite a culture of pro-social action at UBC. We're also the central unit at UBC that operates in recognition and promotion of the reality that true expertise is often held in our communities and by community members that are leading social change efforts. So student learning is not only enhanced through these engagements, but our collective effort to establish a just and equitable and resilient society benefits from opening the doors to those that care enough to serve. So in a typical year, that might look like about 80 instructors across the university taking part or building in community engaged learning into their own work. It looks like 300 odd projects out in community that involve students, faculty members, and community members. And in any given year, that would look like about 7,000 students from UBC being a part of social change. So I like to think of that as a movement more than just and one more thing you could do at UBC, right? Our work, in short, is about connecting communities with UBC faculty and students to tackle issues that impact society today. We focus on bringing community voices, and you'll meet a lot of them tonight in this room, with their diversity of backgrounds and lived experience, together with faculty and students to approach those complex social challenges. And we do this work by working collaboratively with campus and community partners on programs and initiatives, both on and off campus. So as Angela said, we've got a packed agenda. I won't go on too much longer, but I would like to thank you for the time that you've dedicated to this evening, and just pass it back to Angela to tell us a little bit more about what we've got in store for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf. Well, in welcoming everyone into the space of learning, we want to recognize everyone's diverse histories, experiences, values, and identities. Many of you have joined us here in person at the UBC Vancouver campus, but we know that many of you are also joining us virtually, and that can bring challenges. Wherever you're joining us from, we want you to know that this is a shared space for listening to and exploring everyone's unique perspectives. Here's our community agreement for participating in this space. To ensure that this is an inclusive space with mutual support and learning, we ask you to listen with care and respect. Critique the ideas and concepts that are shared and not the individual who raised the idea. Step forward and step back. When we are in the breakout rooms, we ask that you be present and active in the conversation. If you are a person who feels very comfortable speaking up, take note of how you are sharing and consider giving time for others to share. If you tend to be more quiet in group settings, we encourage you to step forward with your ideas and questions, as this will help to create a more informed and inclusive conversation. We also ask that you approach conversations with an open mind and curiosity. And please listen actively. Turn your phones on silent, close other tabs on your computer if you're joining us online, and participate in all the activities with energy and focus, listening for meaning rather than planning a response. Please also treat this space as a safe space for learning, where you can also ask clarifying questions while respecting the diversity of perspectives, histories, and opinions that are present. We also have some housekeeping items that we would like to quickly go over regarding in-person accessibility. For accessibility for our online viewers, these will be posted in the chat. For in-person folks, tonight we're happy to be sharing a Syrian meal with vegan and vegetarian options provided by Taibe. This is located in the back. Taibe is a social enterprise which supports newcomer Syrian women. If you brought reusable plates and cutlery, we encourage you to use them. And there's a waste sorting system outside this room adjacent the cafeteria area. Additional accessibility points are on this slide. Bathrooms are located outside on this level and are wheelchair accessible. There's also a water fountain located outside the room as well. And while we do not have an ASL interpreter, our event will be recorded for viewing and with closed captioning. We also will have CECL staff and volunteers taking photos. If you are uncomfortable being included in these photos, please don't hesitate to identify yourselves to us. As we're still in a pandemic, keeping everyone safe is our collective responsibility. Please keep your mask on and above your nose and sanitize wherever possible. So what is the Social Impact Lab? The Social Impact Lab is a learning platform for students to expand their knowledge beyond the classroom and build community. Students work with each other, community partners, and faculty to develop ideas and solutions through actionable projects that tackle social and environmental issues using a systems thinking and collective impact approach. Tonight's event is the first of a 3-session Social Impact Lab series on climate justice, activating solidarity economies. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed deep fault lines. What began as a health crisis has quickly become a human rights and socioeconomic crisis. Not all climate impacts are experienced equally, and the effects of climate change often have disproportionate effects on historically marginalized frontline communities. After a summer where we experienced just what a heat dome means, in addition to forest fires, smoke, and health warnings, and with COP26 currently happening in Glasgow and BC's roadmap to 2030 just released, tackling climate change and ensuring a just, inclusive, and green economic recovery means that we can't ignore these inequalities. In this decade of action, what can a transformative recovery look like? What are the collective solutions to the climate crisis? And how can we build solidarity? This event provides a platform for participants to engage with representatives from Indigenous communities, community advocates, and community organizations that work in democratic, collective ways of self-determination, which characterizes the social and solidarity economy. In this event, session 1, you will have the opportunity to engage with these groups to learn more about the work that they do and how students can get involved. In session 2, strategize for action, participants can take the energy and momentum from this event forward and work together with others to build an achievable climate justice project. In session 3, students and student teams can pitch a climate justice project idea for an opportunity to receive up to $1,000 to fund it. So what are social and solidarity economy organizations? Well, they're all about the collective community. Social and solidarity economies are diverse, ranging from cooperatives to mutual aid groups, NGOs engaged in income generating activities, community forestry groups, associations of informal sector workers, social enterprises, fair trade organizations and networks, as well as various forms of solidarity finance. They advocate for solidarity, sharing, and caring within communities. This means prioritizing communities over profit and building collective care for one another through people-driven strategies. And with that, I would like to turn things over to Professor Michelle Stack, one of our keynote speakers this evening. Professor Stack's central research interests concern how people, knowledge, and institutions are categorized and the influence of these categorizations on our ability to grapple with inequity. Recent publications include global university rankings and the politics of knowledge, and responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. University rankings or cooperatives is a strategy for developing an equitable and resilient post-secondary education sector. Michelle.
Great. Thank you so much. And I am truly very excited to be here. And this is my first time actually in front of a face-to-face audience because I'm not teaching this term. So I'd like to start also by acknowledging the land we're on, that we are on the unceded and the ancestral and traditional land of the Musqueam people, and that this university was built on this land without the permission of the Musqueam people. And that's really important to what I'm going to be talking about in terms of cooperatives. So I grew up in a co-op in Edmonton, Alberta, actually in what is the Papas-Chase First Nation that was just recognized in 2018. So the co-op I grew up in, I grew up there a long time ago, moved there when I was 6, and I've just recently realized how much that experience influenced my research and how fascinated I am with how we rank people and nature. So it was a mixed income co-op. There were people that were unemployed. There were people that were lawyers and teachers and nurses, and everybody had their own unit. Some people paid less than others, didn't know who paid less, who paid more. Just a couple of people on the committee, the finance committee knew that. And it was a place where I learned that democracy can sometimes be really frustrating. You'd be having long meetings about whether to replace the carpets or the stoves that year, and it wasn't always fun, or long conversations about inclusion. But I also learned about that the alternative of not having democracy is really what the problems that we're facing today. And so this gets me back to, for years, my first research really wasn't about co-ops. And I went back to do a documentary on the co-op I grew up in recently. And somebody said to me, we figured you'd come back at some point. We just didn't think it would take this long. And I think what it was is I was trying to figure out the kind of knot I often have in my stomach, that I love being at the university. There's so much I love about it. But on the other hand, there's these contradictions. And the contradictions of how we go about ranking people and nature in ways that are really antithetical to conversations about equity. So on one hand, I look at equity statements of universities, including this one, and I think, wow, I get kind of a warm and fuzzy feeling. It's like, okay, we're all for equity. We're all for social justice. We're all for dealing with climate change. And then I look at, okay, but how do we structure ourselves? Is a university structured in a way that actually allows for those things, right? And so I look at things like rankings, university rankings, which again, we're high in the rankings at UBC. But what do rankings mean? What does it mean to be a highly ranked institution? Well, highly ranked institutions, if you look at institutions like Harvard, for example, were based on enslaved people, right? Are often based on colonialism, are often based on amassing wealth through fossil fuels. And so we have to look at these contradictions. Now, we all live these contradictions. Who here has a cell phone? A computer. Okay, so where are those cell phones made? Where are the products that are mined, often by child laborers, often destroying environments, more often than not in the global South, in majority world countries, right? So we all live these contradictions. And so it is looking at those contradictions really honestly and saying, how do we think about those contradictions? And then think about what would it mean to live and work and play together differently? What would it mean? And then not just to talk about it, but to think about the structures. So what do we value? Who do we value? Right? Because to me, that's what solidarity economies are about. It's not just about talking about equity and saying that we're about equity. It's about looking at where do we allocate resources? Because where we allocate resources tells us about who we value. And so when we look at things like top ranked universities, they're often the whitest universities and the wealthiest universities. So what does it look like if we think about, for example, education as a right, and to think about cooperatives, to think beyond UBC, to think about the system, the education system, and how do we think about educational equity? How do we think about the fact that universities are where most of the leaders in pretty well every sector at some point go through, right? So what do you learn here? What do you learn about this, how society is structured? And is the way society is structured and where we put resources, is that helping us with dealing with the climate crisis we're in? And so this is the earworm I always have, is the which of these things don't go together? Who watched Sesame Street growing up? So so in looking at, I think about things like principles of co-ops, right? And fighting for climate and social justice. And then what doesn't go together with that? To me, what doesn't go together is how we rank people and nature as productive or unproductive based on dollars, right? And so here, and I think about this, I worked, before I was an academic, I worked in nonprofits, I also worked in government. And so often, you'd get, when I'd raise questions, it was like, well, you're being naive thinking about this. And I remember for a long time thinking, okay, I want to be seen as pragmatic. And now I'm kind of going full circle going, what does pragmatic mean? Right? Where is pragmatic getting us? And to really question when somebody says, that's not possible. This is how things work. Well, things aren't working very well right now in many ways, right? So how do we think about, okay, well, if things aren't working very well, how do we think differently, right? How do we go beyond the way things are now? And so if we look at, for example, if you think about organizations that have done amazing work like Climate Justice BC in saying the university shouldn't be investing in fossil fuels, right? And for years, students were told you're being naive, right? We have to. If we don't invest in fossil fuels, well, you can't do the research that you want to do that is about fighting climate change. But this is where we have to question, is there's always a choice. And I think that students have done such an amazing job of showing that, of saying there is a choice. Universities are starting to divest in fossil fuels. And a big part in looking at what the choices and what the alternatives are is looking at solidarity economies. So cooperatives, 10% of the world's workforce is employed by cooperatives. Millions of people belong to cooperatives. There's a cooperative university in Spain, for example, called Mondragon. And each faculty as a co-op, students have full say in governance. For example, it's a cooperative. There's cooperative universities in Brazil. There's cooperatives in India with over 1 million members. There's cooperatives all over the world that we can learn a lot from, right? And so I think this is where, when you're told, okay, this is naive, we can't do this, you can't have big co-ops. You can, right? You can have big co-ops and you can have small co-ops. And so in looking at co-ops, I think, and this is, I want to give you lots of time to be in your breakout group, so I'm going to be pretty brief here, is I guess some of the suggestions I would have in looking at co-ops and starting up co-ops, and I really hope lots of people here are keen to do that, is to start with the question of whose land are you on, right? So who's, if you're thinking about whether it's a housing co-op or a food co-op, there's so many kinds of co-ops, platform co-ops, digital platform co-ops, is thinking whose land are we on, right? How do we bring the knowledge of the people whose land we're on? And how do we do this in a good way, right? And so I think that's one place to start. A really important area is to start, I think, is what are the values, right? There's nothing neutral about setting up a co-op. There's nothing neutral about setting up a business, right? There's values in it. So what are the values and who is valued in it? So if we look at here, does anybody recognize the picture of the blue thingamajiggy there? Jeff Bezos, the Amazon. So in thinking about what values, who counts, right? So I think about how much media we hear about incredibly wealthy people and how wealth and contribution get conflated. So that's the first thing, is to say, okay, who do we admire, right? So why do we admire people that may be very wealthy but harming the planet, right? And so deconstructing that a bit. And ourselves too, right? I mean, there's an ego to being, for example, at a top ranked university. So it does require, okay, what do I gain from this, right? And so in thinking about that is then thinking about who is deemed worthy and unworthy, who's deemed productive and unproductive. And so here I think about, for example, disabled people, and I deliberately use identity first language rather than people with disabilities. So here I think about who's not present, right? Or who's seen as a burden versus there's disability activists that have been very, very involved in the co-op movement and real innovators in the co-op movement. There's much to learn from. So in looking at that, then we look at who's at the table when we're setting up a co-op and who's not, right? Now, you're never going to have everybody at the table, right? But just bringing it to awareness in terms of, but who is here and who's not, right? And how can we address who's not here that we would like to have here? Thinking about who and what does this serve, right? So in thinking about a co-op, what are the goals of it, or some other social enterprise? What are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? And how do you go about doing that? And so whose knowledge counts? And here I have a picture of two friends that died this summer. And the reason I have a picture of them is that Dan actually spoke to classes here. He was often homeless. And once he came to an economics class, I went with him. And he sat there in the corner and he was carving. And the students were looking at him and expecting to hear all about how hard his life was. And then he said, I'm a student too. And they looked like, what? What do you mean you're a student? He goes, in my culture, if you're not learning, you're dead. I'm a student too. Dan's had a lot of knowledge. So did his brother, Frank. They knew more about Commercial Drive than anybody there. When I was trying to find my sister, I just asked them, but they also knew they knew the area, they could tell you all sorts of things. And they came with a lot of knowledge. And so part of it is, often I think it's really easy to see some people as knowledge makers and producers and others as not, as beneficiaries. So thinking about that, right? Thinking, and this requires us to really think about our own schooling Two, who's seen as the knowledge producers in the textbooks? Who are seen as the people that are the beneficiaries of knowledge, right? And who's absent in that? Because if we think about that, that's really helpful to thinking about how we set up our own co-ops, right? It's like, okay, are we reproducing ourselves here? Are we, if we really want to expand how we think about the world and how we live together in different ways, how do we do that in ways that allow us to see different types of people, people from different backgrounds than our own as knowledge producers that could help, that could be part of creating new co-ops or solidarity economies? The other example I have here is the Banker Ladies. And so this is a documentary done by Dr. Caroline Shanaze Hossein. Brilliant documentary. And so she challenges some of the whiteness, the history of sort of seeing co-ops as something that was developed in the UK, which is not the case, and talks about susus. So informal co-ops set up by women that were where they would all put money in, and then that money might go to one person and then to another person. And it was a way when banks weren't trusted for them to form solidarity economies. So that's a really excellent documentary to look at in terms of how these women developed their own co-op, their own solidarity economy based on their needs. And so just in terms of thinking about how to create structures, how do you think about them in terms of disrupting inequity, who's present, who's absent? What Angela was talking about, who speaks and who is silent and why? And then what skills are present in the room and what are the strategies for addressing skills that are missing? And so this is something we'll talk about, like having the person that's really good at writing the bylaws, having somebody that's good at the money, right? That is useful. So thinking about that. And then I think the big thing for me is to really, there's an expression, a co-op among co-ops. There's principles, 7 sort of main principles that people talk about in terms of co-ops. And a lot of it is the co-op among co-ops and co-ops educating other co-ops. There are some amazing co-ops in BC. And some of them I think are actually here today, either in person or online, that are doing really innovative work in a whole number of areas. So I have a few of their screenshots of their websites up here. So really learning from those co-ops, learning with them and supporting each other, I think is really important. And then this I believe is crucial, and that is to have fun. So at the beginning I said sometimes, when I was 15 and often my thought bubbles were expressed far too often about how bored I sometimes was in meetings, but I look back at how important those meetings were and also how much fun that those meetings could be in terms of building a sense of community and people that I still connect with years and years later. And a sense of real respect for the skills that other people have. So having fun, I have a picture of my little great niece there, and then that's running a race with a friend that did indeed dress up as a bear and did a half marathon in that costume. And so I think I want to give us a lot of time for discussion. And so that's pretty well what I have. A really big thank you to Cecil for organizing this, and to the Climate Justice UBC for getting this going, because I think it's such an exciting event and so exciting to think about the possibility of building co-ops on campus. And I'm happy to chat with anybody. I think there's different ways of looking at co-ops on campuses, but also I'd really hope people dream big in a way in terms of thinking multi-level, right? So thinking about a small co-op you can develop, but also imagining what would a university look like, right? That was cooperative. How would it be different? And so to think about that as well as you're developing also doable ideas within the time frame that we have. Thank you. Questions, or is that later? After, great.
Thank you, Michelle. Now I'd like to introduce Britt Runnicles from Climate Justice UBC. They will be speaking about how CJUBC's work connects with building collective communities. Britt is a climate activist and writer living in so-called Vancouver on unceded Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh land. They are one of the coordinators for Climate Justice UBC, a group of students who organize to tackle climate change and its root causes. Britt is passionate about blending their writing life and community advocacy together to educate people on the importance of protecting the environment for future generations. Britt's advocacy at the university has extended to publishing the UBC Trans and Non-Binary Student Guide for incoming UBC students. They are also the student representative for the Dean of Arts Search Committee, and they work on the UBC Board of Directors. Britt.
Hi, everyone. It's really funny being here and not on Zoom, especially when you're doing a speech on Zoom. You can like take your notes right by the camera and then no one catches you. Anyway, maybe I'm exposing myself right now, but hi, everyone. My name is Britt. I'm one of the coordinators of Climate Justice UBC. And on behalf of Climate Justice UBC, we're really excited to see the Social Impact Lab kick off. Climate Justice UBC, formerly known as UBC C350, is a group of students that organize to tackle climate change and its root causes. We see the climate movement as being inseparable from movements for racial, social, and economic justice. CJUBC has a long history of student activists, and I really like that Michelle also highlighted some of those student activists and the work that they've been doing. These activists have challenged the status quo and have looked for opportunities to make change in their communities. One change started in 2013 when CJUBC first started their 6-year divestment campaign, pushing UBC to divest from fossil fuels. Those students and the students who came after them researched to learn more about the investment system that existed at UBC, the reason why UBC had said no to divestment in the past, and the ways that they could change the decision to hold UBC accountable to their commitment to being a global leader. As a movement, students strategized and bravely experimented with new tactics and approaches. And while we faced roadblocks, we also celebrated victories. And ultimately, UBC committed to divesting from fossil fuels in 2019. This story to me sheds light on the power of student organizers. It doesn't take a degree or decades of experience to see a need in the community and fill it. This past summer, CJUBC teamed up with SFU 350 on the Towards a People's Endowment campaign. This campaign targets the university's endowments funds to push our universities to reinvest in our communities, to value people over profit. Student organizers saw an opportunity to push community investments as viable alternatives for the universities to invest in and develop opportunities for income generation, local jobs, affordable and green housing, renewable energy projects, and greater social well-being. To direct capital into communities that have been traditionally excluded from financing mechanisms, and into projects that will build the just transition and post-carbon economy that we need. And ultimately, to shift economic power and control into the hands of the people. Additionally, acknowledging that a portion of the UBC's endowment fund comes from stolen and Indigenous land. This campaign starts a conversation about the way that the university utilizes the profit they make off stolen land and their responsibility to ensure that their investments are aligned with their commitment to the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. In the engagement process for UBC's Indigenous Plan, we heard that the community wanted to see more Musqueam-owned businesses and student cooperatives on campus. This could look like diverting investments to creating community loan funds, community land trusts for housing and agriculture, and more. Before I started this campaign, I wasn't well-versed in financial lingo or lobbying or community reinvestments. I'm an English literature and creative writing major. I have never taken an Econ 101 class, and I really hope I never have to. All of us come from very different educational backgrounds, and to me, that's a good thing. Different groups' experiences and perspectives mean that everyone can take on a different role to help make the project run. Before you start to ideate on your projects, I wanted to note the importance of consultation. If you're creating a solution to a problem or a gap, you need to know the stakeholders who are involved in that and that problem. You also need to know how your projected project will impact them and what their needs and wants are from that project. This can give you a sense of why the project may not have existed in the past and some of the barriers that you may face. At CJUBC, we recognize that students have always been the experts of their own lived experiences and the best advocates for what we need. We initiated this collaboration with CECL out of a desire to reimagine alternative economies, realizing that this was a huge gap on campus. As students, we should, and we have the power to, build solidarity economies rooted in care and shape the campus that we want to see. While you attend this event, I hope you'll remind yourself that it doesn't matter if you're a student or not, if you have experience creating a project or not. It doesn't matter if you don't know what the phrase solidarity economies means. You can learn, and you have support around you to help you learn. And there's a legacy of students who started from very different knowledge backgrounds, who came together to create historical change on and off campus. And I hope that you'll be part of that legacy too. Thank you.
Thank you, Britt. In a moment, I'm going to introduce the representatives from the Indigenous communities, community advocates, and organizations that you will have an opportunity to connect with and have a direct conversation with alongside students and community members as part of our human library portion of this event. But first, why are we doing a human library? In building solidarity on the climate crisis, could our most successful path lie in creating a unifying narrative for social change? This Social Impact Lab Human Library event is an opportunity to learn directly from the experiences of Indigenous communities, community advocates, and community organizations working in the social and solidarity economy. Community guest speakers taking part in the Human Library will share their knowledge through conversation and stories, which can help us to imagine what a just, inclusive, and green recovery can look like, with the potential of creating transformative change. So who can you connect with today in our breakout rooms? For online participants, the breakout room information will be posted in the chat. If you have more questions and would like to have a follow-up conversation with Britt and additional members from Climate Justice UBC, they will be in this room, the BC Hydro Theatre. David Ng and Moniz from the Vancouver Artists Labor Union Cooperative are also joining us today. Value Co-op is a unionized workers cooperative with a mission to transform labor practices within the arts and cultural sector. Democratically operated by their artist members, Value Co-op is values-driven and believes in empowering artists and cultural workers through fair, secure, and flexible employment that supports artists to do what they do best, make art. Value Co-op strives to do their work in organizing an intersectional and anti-oppressive framework that supports their members' needs and which contributes meaningfully to their communities. To learn from Value Co-op, you can engage with them at a breakout table on the second floor. Dr. Matt Hearn is a co-founder and co-director of Solid State Community Industries. This evening, you can connect with him on how Solid State supports youth from racialized backgrounds to form their own enterprises. Naisha Khan, Dana Cajero, and Zoha Faisal are also joining us from Climate Recentered, a movement of IPOC youth from so-called Surrey. And their goals are to reshape the white narrative of climate organizing, create a community of care built around mutual aid, bring marginalized and racialized populations to the forefront of climate discussions, and the aim to uplift community organizing to center joy over shame and build a better world for all with communities of color leading the change. You can connect with Solid State Industries and Climate Recentered in the Policy Lab adjacent to this theater that's just over there. The online breakout room, again, will be posted in the chat. Recognizing that effective climate solutions uphold Indigenous sovereignty, tonight we have Andrew Moore joining us from Sook First Nation. For the last 12 years, he has been working on reserve, transforming Sook First Nation's visions into reality with major renewable energy, greenhouse, seafood, and cultural projects completed. Before COVID, the Sook Center for Sustainability had over 2,000 visitors a year arriving for workshops from all over the world as a way of disseminating the lessons learned and best practices that have been gained. He recently introduced and coordinated a First Nation to First Nation community planning mentorship program across Canada with Indigenous Services Canada's support that encourages First Nation energy autonomy. Andrew's breakout room will be upstairs. This evening, we have Steph Koenig, one of the co-founders of Neighbor Lab, and Anna Mendez, communication specialist, joining us. Neighbor Lab is a design studio and workers co-op that explores resilience and emergency preparedness through public spaces. If you're interested in physical infrastructure and design as a tool for community engagement, climate resilience, and emergency preparedness, in-person attendees can engage with Neighbor Lab on the second floor. From Kensington Market Community Land Trust in Toronto, we have Chi Tam, an urban planner and community organizer raised in Vancouver. She is currently the development manager of Kensington Market Community Land Trust in Toronto. She also organizes with Friends of Chinatown, Toronto, which is also exploring a community land trust as an anti-displacement strategy for racial and economic justice. She frequently consults with groups regarding social enterprise legislation, governance, and cooperative strategies. In a moment, we're going to send you off to the breakout tables to meet with community partners that have just been introduced. For online access to the breakout rooms, please refer to the instructions that are in the chat box. For in-person attendees, on the screen is a QR code that you can scan with your phone. Once you scan the code with your phone, a link should pop up that takes you to a directory of the community partners and organizers that you can speak with this evening. We also have copies of this QR code posted in various locations. The directory includes the topic or theme that the community partner will talk about, and 4 words or phrases that can be used to describe their work. Use the directory to find where the community partner you want to speak with this evening will be located. The first floor will feature solid state industries and climate recentered, and Climate Justice UBC, as I said, will stay in this room if there are any follow-up questions. Upstairs, you will find Sook First Nation Solar Project, Value Co-op, Kensington Market Community Land Trust, and Neighbor Lab. We will be doing 2 20-minute rounds of conversation. Once you find a partner you'd like to chat with, look at the map and find out where to go. In the breakout rooms, you will be given a 5-minute warning before you'll be asked to transition to the next community partner that you'd like to speak with. So keep this in mind when you're making decisions on who you'd like to engage with. So this is the session flow for tonight's event. We're not doing too badly. As you'll see there, we're right there, asking you to find your roundtable discussion rooms. So we're going to send you off now. But before you go and do that, I encourage you all to enjoy the food that's been provided by Taipei. Please feel free to ask one of the CECL team members if you have trouble locating the breakout room you'd like to go to. And Natsuki on our virtual chat can also assist for online participants on key learnings and takeaways. We would now like to do a quick share back with Michelle and Britt and Steph, who's here tonight. Do we have the climate recentered folks still here? Yes, great. We'd love to tap you for your key takeaways as well. So online participants, we encourage you to create a waterfall in the chat with your key takeaways, okay? And Michael is going to bring around the microphone. Let's start with climate recentered, perhaps. In the back.
Yeah, this is one thing we wanted to share was the importance of joy in our organizing. A lot of systems of oppression are rooted in hate and shame, or hate for ourselves or hate for the other. So something that we're really trying to do moving forward is incorporating joy into what we do and the work that we do, and like really trying to enjoy the work that we do, because there's a lot of feelings of climate doomism and climate grief and climate anxiety that are associated. And we don't want that. Yeah, so, and also like, because we are marginalized peoples, we wanted to add that practicing joy is an act of anti-oppression. Yeah, I'll let Gavin and Zoe share. Oh, also my name is Nisha, if you didn't know.
One of my key takeaways is I think the reason why we're focusing on Surrey is because we have a racialized population. We have 22% Indigenous population is where Indigenous families choose to live. And also our municipal government is mostly white and whole people, and which is pretty hypocritical because we live in a city with a racialized population, and we just wanted to make something in Surrey where BIPOC youth voices are centered, and we can bring some of our ideas into climate action.
So, hi, I'm Zoha. I use she, her pronouns. I'm grade 10 after the start of secondary, and one of my key takeaways tonight was, well, our group is really focused on recentering the narrative toward BIPOC voices, which are very often overlooked in climate discussion or most discussions, when it has been the work of BIPOC and like our cultures for centuries that have been practicing sustainability, but often get overlooked in favor of white ideas. And so our main purpose is to like shine the spotlight on BIPOC voices and encourage accessible learning towards us.
Well, for me, what I learned today was that I'm surrounded by a bunch of phenomenal, brilliant activists that, I mean, I think this has been one of the most inspiring days I've had in a very long time, so thank you. And just also the need for more intergenerational connections and the importance of doing what many people here do, which is connecting climate change to racism, to white supremacy, to ableism, to patriarchy, to looking at the number of issues that connect to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, when I first walked into the building, I had like a flood of memories come in because about 4 or 5 years ago, I was sitting in this room and I met the co-founder, who became one of my very close friends, of NeighborLab. So I think what really resonated with me and what I'm seeing today with so many like real humans in a room is the power of like students being together and having like visions and ideas and excitement, because that's where I was 5 years ago. And I saw a gap in the work that I was doing in the field that I wanted to get into, which was the creative field and the design field. And I worked with a bunch of students to fill that gap. And we're still working on that. So I think embracing being a student and being a lifelong learner is something I'm definitely reminded of this evening and want to take into the rest of my days. So thank you, everyone. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, tonight was great. I think it's always so exciting to hear people's perspectives and to be reminded of how much excitement exists in this room and how much passion there is. This tonight reminded me of the importance of collaboration, not just within the university, but outside as well, and collaboration across borders, and how much we can learn from people at different universities and people with different experiences. And I'm also joined by Michelle, who's also in CJASE, who will share her takeaway.
Yeah, we also talked a lot about the importance of community and how vital that is to building long-term sustainable movements that people want to be part of. And in addition, we talked about the importance of global solidarity. We had some awesome quotes from other parts of the world. So that was great to chat about how we can build stronger communities of solidarity. Great, thank you all for sharing. To support climate justice UBC and Professor Michelle Stack in their work, we have an additional question for you. Can we have a show of hands if you'd be interested in being part of a group that is focused on developing cooperatives on campus? We have that show of hands now. And if you're online, please use the funds to raise your hand. Thanks for just taking a shot. Want to support our collaborators in their work. Thank you. Thank you everyone for your energy and contributions during the Social Impact Lab. Your feedback is invaluable to us. And to help us to continue to provide this kind of programming and improve our work, we have a brief post-survey poll that we hope you'll help us fill out. Completing the survey will also provide you with an opportunity to win some great door prizes
And the winners will be posted on our social media pages in the next few days. So please follow us on Facebook and Instagram if you don't already. And you can use your camera to take a shot of that QR code. It'll take you directly to that survey. So thank you again, everyone, for coming. We hope you were inspired by the stories you heard today and will carry forward some of the learnings. Please take advantage of the connections that you made today, and we encourage you to keep thinking of ways that you can engage in collective action on the climate emergency. The next opportunity to engage with the Social Impact Lab is to participate in sessions 2 and 3. Our next session is on November 18th, and it provides an opportunity for students to engage, to strategize for action, connecting with others, including community partners, mentors, and advisors, to take the energy and momentum from this event forward, and to work together in building an achievable climate justice project. LV Del Bianco, Cooperative Portfolio Manager at Van City Credit Union, I believe he's online, has agreed to be one of our advisors. So LV, if you're still online, please feel free to give a wave. Our final session will be a pitch party on December 2nd. That will be taking place here at the BC Hydro Theatre. And you'll have the opportunity to pitch your climate justice project to a panel of adjudicators for an opportunity to receive up to $1,000 to fund it. As always, these CSOL events are free, and you're encouraged to attend all 3 sessions or watch the recordings, especially if you're planning to participate in the pitch party. For participants that complete all 3 sessions of the Social Impact Lab, we can also provide a letter of recognition for your completion of the series. So there's more opportunities to get involved at CSOL. Here are some upcoming opportunities that you can check out, including a job opportunity. We are currently hiring for 8 climate action mobilizers. These are paid undergraduate level positions that we are recruiting for students to lead and take action on the climate emergency through the Social Impact Lab. CSOL's Reading Week, You Be the Change, and Map the System programs also offer additional opportunities to engage with communities on social challenges. And please visit our website for more info. And that's it. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. It was wonderful to have you all, and I hope that you learned a lot.